The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. We begin our focus this morning on the race for Cincinnati City Council. This is a field race, which means the top 9 finishers win. No head-to-head races. Name recognition is paramount, and incumbents have an enormous advantage. Of the 9 members of council, none are term limited out, so there are no open seats. But 3 of the current members of council have been appointed to fill seats of members who have left council over the last 2 years, including Wendell Young, who replaced Lakita Cole, Amy Murray, who replaced Chris Monzel, and Wayne Lippert, who replaced Jeff Birding. Young has run 3 times and never won. He was 13th in 2009. Murray ran for the first time in 2009 and finished 11th. And Lippert has never run. Until a person wins on their own, they have to be considered very vulnerable. This year, 23 people are officially in the race. 22 names will appear on the ballot, plus 1 official write-in candidate, which means the votes get counted. The Democrats have endorsed 9 candidates, 4 of whom are now on council, and Republicans have a short slate with only 4 endorsed candidates, 3 of whom are incumbents. The Charterites have endorsed 4 candidates, including 2 cross-endorsed with the Democratic slate. 6 independents are running, including former council member Christopher Smitherman and Hamilton County prosecutor Mike Allen, who are very much in the mix. This is the only one of many races in the region, and we cannot interview everyone. My policy is to focus on non-incumbents, including appointed members who have never won on their own, and then only those that are in play or show promise of having an impact in future years. We begin this morning with Jason Riveiro, a democratically endorsed candidate. This is his first run for office. Jason edits a Spanish language journal and is the market manager for a Spanish language FM radio station. As the Ohio director of LULAC, he helped land and manage the national convention of that civil rights organization that drew 20,000 people to Cincinnati this past July. And Nicholas Hollan, a Democrat who is making his second run. He is a lifelong Cincinnatian who worked as a volunteer on the Gulf Coast after the hurricanes, and then as an employee of the Red Cross, and now owns his own business, Valley Dental, that's located out in Roselawn. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
And welcome to the race. Jason, what do you think you would bring to council if you end up being elected that isn't there today?
Right. When I first moved here in 2005, I immediately started working on a lot of issues of inclusion. And so that's an important factor within itself. I think we understand that when we talk about diversity, that's a very important topic within our city, but also within that, and I think myself as Nicholas are people that run small businesses. That's an important facet I think that is missing currently on there. And so especially during these tough economic times, knowing how to run a small business and being able to be successful, being able to double in size are things and track records that people can point to and say this is maybe someone that we can trust with our budget. In addition to being able to now, as I serve on the board of SORTA, already have some governmental experience there managing an $83 million budget.
Okay. Nicholas, how about you? What would you bring that isn't on council at the moment?
Well, Jason's right, and we have the ability to bring a small business perspective to council. I mean, I know what it is to operate a budget. I know what it is to run an organization effectively and efficiently, and those are skill sets that are sorely lacking on council. We see it every year when we have a $30 million deficit. We have a council who's not willing to tackle some of these tough issues. And the other part of that is my background in human services. You know, I've spent my life working for the American Red Cross and the United Way. I see the value that human services bring to a community, and I'm dedicated to ensuring, again, that the budget has funding for those programs that I think are absolutely critical.
Well, let's pursue that. I was going to pursue it a little bit later, but both of you have made similar points, and on your websites, which we're going to refer people to, you both make points about the human services budget. What is it that you think in the most recent budget, and given the budget that we would be facing in December, what is it that either needs to be saved, restored, or created on that human services side, Nicholas?
Sure. I mean, I look at things like school nurses. You know, there's plans out there that want to cut the funding for the school nurses. That comes from the city budget. To me, that is an absolutely tremendous mistake. I mean, these school nurses are a critical role to these schools. For many children, that's their first line of health care.
Why should the city do that rather than the schools do that?
Sure, because I think the city has an obligation for the well-being, the health care of its populace. And that starts with children. That starts with making sure kids are in school, they're able to stay in school, they're healthy, they're getting an education, and then we turn it over to the school board for the school board's funding. But I think that background, that outside of the school district, that we have an obligation as city council members to provide for the well-being of the community, and that includes school nurses.
Jason, an area you talked about was the need for diversity inclusion.
Right.
One of those programs that has suffered recently, and it's related, it's also related to crime issues, but I don't think it's just that. SERVE program.
Right. Glad you brought that up.
What's your view on SERVE?
I'm on the board of Cincinnati Human Relations Commission. I think SERVE has proven to be a very effective program. I think former Chief Stryker was someone that believed in it, and so we have to be, just as in healthcare and other things, it's more cost effective in the long run to be preventive, and SERVE is one of these preventive measures that sends people out into the community, people that have prior history, whether felonies or understand they come from a gang background, and they speak to these young people, and so they're able to deter future incidents of gun violence.
But SERVE or school nurses, and there's a bunch of others,
Sure.
they're getting squeezed because of the budget situation. What are you willing to do in the budget? I mean, and there's got to be some hard decisions. You can't push this off forever. What are you willing to cut? And most importantly, are you willing to cut either police or fire? Let's start with you, Jason.
Sure. I have an opinion on, I think, improving efficiencies. Right now, I think my mindset and the way that I approach things for council is that I think we need to let the departments handle their budgets, and they're coming up right now with their ideas. We have a city manager who is doing his job. My idea would be to create immediate revenue for the city. One way that I'm exploring right now, things that I'll propose within the coming month, is a enforcement of bank-owned foreclosed homes. So a model very similar to what we saw in Los Angeles, to where anytime a bank wants to foreclose on a property, they're charged $20,000, because that is really in the long term what the city ends up paying for foreclosures. And so last year alone, if we saw over 1,200 foreclosures in the city of Cincinnati, we could have generated a possible about $24 million there.
Now, is this, when a bank closes, do they have to pay the real estate taxes on that property?
Yes, they're the ones that are liable. Many times I hear it from all communities, especially on the west end. You have Westwood, you have East Price Hill, West Price Hill.
So the $20,000 would be on top of the real estate
Correct.
fees?
They're responsible for that portion of them. Many times, even for the taxes, it's hard to even find.
And does council have the ability to pass that kind of legislation?
They have the ability to pass ordinances and fees, or whether to assess fees through the county as well. So there's different mechanisms to do so. In California, they did it on a statewide initiative, but we can also do things on the local level.
Nicholas, let's get over to you on this question of budget and either the reduction of costs by what would you cut if you want to save certain things, and you happen to talk about visiting nurses or school nurses, or revenue generation. Where are you on both of those?
Sure. Well, I think you have to embrace both strategies. One is a long-term, one is a short-term. In the long term, I would absolutely love to grow the city's revenue, so we're not having this conversation about what basic city services to cut. Until we get there, we do have to make cuts. We do have to take action, and that's action that's been put off year after year, which is why we have an enormous deficit year after year. So to answer you directly, absolutely cuts to every department are on the table.
Including police?
Absolutely, absolutely. You're spending right now 66% of the budget on public safety spending, police and fire. 1/3 on everything else the city does. And if you put that in context, over the last decade, the budget for public safety departments has increased 35%. The budget for everybody else has shrunk 28%. I mean, I think that's clear. You've made cuts in other departments. The only thing left that hasn't been touched is public safety spending.
Do you have a sense of how many police and or fire ought to be cut, or is this something, what's the role of the city manager in this?
Sure.
Because he constantly makes
proposals. And he gets constantly shot down. You're absolutely right.
Well,
and he's put forth several strategies to make cuts, to balance the budget. And there's a conservative majority on council who refuses to touch it. It's a non-starter.
I think the basic frustration for me has been that where a council member or someone, a candidate, decides to say, hey, let's hire a whole bunch of police because this is what's going to make the city more effective. But yet the police have never said we want these individuals. So at the end of the day, we're not letting the professionals do their job. And so when we as council members are driven by these large pronounced statements or ideas, these political statements, then we get ourselves into these troubles. So it's not the fault of the police. It's a fault of council many years ago that we have not addressed these issues in the long term. So.
One of the other sides that the council could reverse policy on is that for years they've been rolling back the inside millage. You know, because it's politically popular to keep rolling it back. And this year, when the manager proposed that we not roll it back, that we allow it to rise again, at least so we could generate as much money as we used to with this, council shut him down. Where do you stand on, at least even temporarily, stopping the rollback of established city taxes? Jason, we'll start with you this time.
No, I think I think people are especially for properties, and you know, they're fine with it. I think most people that I talk to, I think I'm in favor of that. I just put it forward.
I am too. And if you look at this fundamentally, on a $100,000 home, you're talking about an average increase of roughly $15. Now that's $15, might not be much individually, but when that's cumulative across the city, now you're making an impact. I mean, nobody wants to raise taxes, but we're in a revenue problem. We've already made cuts. We have to bring in more sources of income. I think this is one of them.
And the state of Ohio is cutting local contributions of the state taxes to local government. So
there's a shortfall that we have to come up.
And if you look at the property values and what they're based on now, I mean, I think people are saying, well, my home is not worth what it was until we're able to bring that back.
We're almost out of time, but very quickly, do you have any big ideas? You know, merger of Cincinnati Police and Sheriff's Department, and now that Lisa has announced his resignation or retirement. Do you have anything big that would change the equation, not just sort of adjusting these around the edges? Nicholas?
Sure. And my big focus has been on neighborhood revitalization, and I think that means turning over more control of neighborhoods to the community councils, to the neighborhoods. And I'll give you one concrete example. The city withdrew the funding for lawn maintenance for those empty, dilapidated buildings that the grass is growing up. They're eyesores in communities. The city is no longer cutting that grass, no longer billing the owner. I think that we have to turn that control over to the neighborhoods. I truly believe neighborhood individuals are at the local level. They're best suited to deal with those problems.
Big idea?
Yeah, I think we need to have a serious conversation about the way that we elect our officials. I think whether we need to explore a combination of a ward system with a citywide election, I think that's important. But at the end of the day, I think we need to refocus specifically on the charter to say what is the exact role of council members.
Okay. Thank you very much. This has been very good in a short period of time. If you want to learn more about these two candidates, check out their websites at nicholashollan.com and Riveiro4, the number 4, council.com. Thank you very much for being here. People say they want to change. Stay tuned. After the break, 2 more first-time candidates for Cincinnati City Council. Welcome back. I'm now joined by 2 first-time candidates for Cincinnati City Council. Kathy Atkinson is running as an independent, a grassroots volunteer and activist. Ms. Atkinson is in her 6th year as president of the Walnut Hills Area Council and volunteers with Citizens on Patrol. Chris Seelbach is a democratically endorsed candidate. He grew up in Louisville and came to Xavier University, for college. He is vice president and CFO for the marketing consulting firm of Seidowitz Group. In 2004, Chris helped lead the successful effort to repeal Article 12, which banned council from taking action to protect the rights of gays. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
and let's just, something I figured out from reading your website, which we'll refer people to.
Sure.
Your family owns the Seelbach Hotel.
It used to. It's a Hilton now.
Okay, but in Louisville,
it's in my family,
which
yes.
is one of the great little famous hotels in the Midwest. It's really wonderful. Kathy, you are really that neighborhood person. I mean, you're grounded in the Walnut Hills, in the neighborhood council, the area council. What is it you would bring to council, do you think, if you were elected, that's not there now?
I think the opportunity for the average citizen to feel like there's somebody approachable on council who will listen to neighborhood concerns. I've had several residents come and say, I've never felt comfortable thinking I could go down to City Hall and anybody would listen to what I have to say. We can talk to you. And I think that that's something that we can do neighborhood to neighborhood at the grassroots level, listening to residents.
Chris, what about you? What do you think you would bring to council?
You know, one of the most important things why I'm running is because I'm tired of council fighting with each other. You know, instead of talking about the issues, it seems a lot of times that we just attack each other personally. So, you know, I worked for David Crowley for many years, and one of the things that I took away the most was that you have to be able to disagree without being disagreeable. So I'm going to bring civility to council. I want to debate the issues and the merits of the issues, but never stoop to that level of attacking each other on a personal level.
You're going to buy a bar so that you can take everybody out after? I mean,
hey, I'd love to.
That was kind of his approach. I mean,
yeah,
you know.
Hey, that sounds good to me.
You know, this whole neighborhood, I mean, it's in every election, Kathy. You know,
yes.
People, we're for the neighborhoods, and somehow that's interpreted as the problem is downtown and where do the resources go. Concretely, what do you think what should be the neighborhood policy for the city that maybe doesn't exist at this point?
I think neighborhoods need to realize that we're part of a whole, and the city needs to realize that it has many parts, and that without a single part, it won't operate efficiently, effectively, and we won't have a quality of life that will work for everyone. I think each neighborhood has a unique asset. That's why we have the neighborhoods. I don't think there should be a duplication of every single service or every single activity in every single neighborhood. We can't afford that, and that's not why our neighborhoods are here. So I think each neighborhood needs to be identified for the jewel that it is in the crown, and we need to build collectively on each one of those jewels for solutions.
Are you a person who would, being neighborhood grounded, see that, and this is my bias, that we're not ever going to restore every neighborhood business district? I mean, that's just not the way modern urban America works. And sometimes it seems to me the city has poured money into trying to do things in neighborhood business districts because it made people in neighborhoods happy, but it really had no impact at all.
No, I don't think we can sustain 52, actually there are 34 neighborhood business districts. Each neighborhood business district may have some neighborhood activity that serves people locally and may attract people into the district, but a widespread commercial expansion of all neighborhood districts, restoring them to the level that they were at in the 50s and 60s is not going to be feasible.
Chris, a lot of the arguing that you were talking about
Sure.
that becomes very unmanageable at times is around the budget.
Yeah.
And if you're elected, you're sworn in December 1st, and actually the argument over the budget has already started. So, you know, what is it concretely that you would propose that either you want to see saved, restored, and then tell me what you'd be willing to give up in order to make that happen?
Well, first of all, I think we have to come from the mentality that there's no sacred cows. So no budget should be ignored from looking for waste. And I think if we do that, then we're going to see that we don't have to cut a lot of the things that we're trying to cut now. But the things that I would take off the table, for instance, the Office of Environmental Quality, which my former boss, David Crowley, helped bring back. It's actually bringing in revenue for the city, yet a conservative majority of council wants to cut it. Makes absolutely no sense.
It's not necessarily for financial reasons, though. It may be ideological reasons they want to cut it.
Well, and I don't want to cut anything that's making us money. So I both support the Office of Environmental Quality and think that, you know, we need money, the revenue more than ever. And so why would we cut something that's making us money? So that would be off the table. You know, I would just look at it even-handedly. Instead of looking at the politics of always trying to balance our budget on the backs of working class Americans and working class Cincinnatians, I would look across the board.
Well, the tough question is, what do we do with police and fire?
Right.
Are you open to cuts of the police and fire?
Well, I don't think we're at a point where we have to cut any police officer job. And I agree with Chief Craig and the FOP, I think, that there's a lot of waste in the administrative budget of the police. And if we look for waste there, I think we're going to find a lot. And if we can cut that, then no police officer has to be taken off the force. And I don't want that to happen. I understand the frustration of the department. There hasn't been a new police class since 2008.
Waste in the administration, but no police officer would lose their job?
I think that we can make that happen. Yep.
I mean, there's almost all personnel costs there.
Well, I mean, but you find line items like spending $1 million on overseeing off-duty police patrol. I mean, that makes no sense to me.
Okay. Kathy, what about you? What concretely on the budget would you be willing to see adjusted?
I'm in the same camp as Chris on this. I think we have to look at fire safety budgets and realize that efficiencies need to be brought to the table. I don't believe that we should always think that the low-hanging fruit of the boots on the street or the frontline workers in any department is the way to resolve a budget cut. Those are emotional issues, and those are the solutions that always come forward, whether it's closing our neighborhood pools or laying off police and fire. I think there are efficiencies at an administrative and management level that could absorb the cuts that departments need to make. And at the same time, we really do have to look at revenue increases.
Okay, let's be practical about revenue increases. The two things that sort of get mentioned are maybe a fee for garbage collection, and two, reverse the policy the city has had for a number of years of rolling back the millage that it is legally allowed to charge on real estate taxes. And the manager has proposed both. Where do you stand on both of those?
I am in the city manager's camp on both of those. I think many of the residents, homeowners that I talk to at the grassroots level are totally in favor of allowing the millage collection to be at its maximum point. And as far as the trash collection fee, this is the first municipality that I have lived in where there was not a trash collection fee included in my water bill. So I think we've been receiving services for a number of years here that could generate revenue, and it's a cost of doing business in other areas.
Chris, what about you?
So I don't support any kind of tax increase, whether it's sales, income, or property tax. I don't think that we need to at this point. If we were to enact a garbage fee, which Kathy's right, almost every city has one, I would want it to be as a pay-as-you-throw fee. So, if you reuse and recycle and try to have a sustainable life, then you're not throwing away a lot, and so you don't pay as much. But if you're someone who doesn't recycle, who throws away almost everything that you consume, then you pay a little bit more. So I would want to see it, it's an incentive to waste less.
And that would be handled by selling tags in effect, so that you'd have to use tags to put bags out and whatever?
No, just like our recycling is weighed as it goes into the recycling bin, our garbage would be weighed as well.
Okay, all right. For each of you, is there some big thing, some breakthrough idea? The merger of the Cincinnati Police Force and the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department, the merger of all Hamilton County fire departments, whatever. Is there some big thing that you would propose? Chris, let's start with you.
No, I'm absolutely against basically eliminating our police department in hopes that the sheriff department hires the officers back at a much lower wage and much reduced salaries.
Well, that was the proposal that was on the table before.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to be the proposal.
Well, I'm against it.
Okay.
I think it's nothing more than union busting. I think that we need to make transportation a top priority in the city if we're going to compete a decade or 2 decades from now. And what that means for me is that our airport is dying, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen. It's a regional issue. We need to stop thinking of it as a Kentucky issue. It's why we're losing business and population, and we need all of the regional stakeholders at the table to figure out a solution.
Kathy, big idea.
Well, big idea. I think there are opportunities for shared services and merger activities at the city, county, regional level. I think we've lost a lot of residents in the city of Cincinnati to outlying areas, and there is an opportunity to continue to see us as a single region. I don't believe that that means anything needs to be eliminated. I think mergers are mergers. They're not total eliminations of any one entity.
They don't always save money right away either. So,
Not right away.
So, thank you both for being here. I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you. There are websites for both of these candidates, www.seelbachforcouncil.com and www.atkinsonforneighborhoods.com. So I encourage everybody to take a look at the more systematic things, and thank you. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Next week, 2 more first-time candidates, a Democrat and the only new face on the Republican slate, and look at an interesting issue on the ballot in Northern Kentucky. Have a good week.